The wedding photo showed a bride and groom dressed in typical 1880s clothing, but something about it immediately made Dr. Sarachin stop. She had spent years studying old images as an archivist at the Boston Historical Society. Yet this one felt different. The bride wore a detailed white dress with a high collar and long sleeves, and the groom sat in a dark suit with a formal cravat. At first, Sarah focused on the bride's face. People rarely smiled in photos from that time, but the bride's tense eyes and tight jaw suggested she was holding back strong emotion. Her hand rested on the groom's arm, but her fingers looked stiff, almost locked in place. The groom appeared even stranger. His posture seemed unnaturally rigid, even for Victorian photography. His eyes looked unfocused, his skin oddly waxy, and he was propped in a chair while the bride stood behind him, holding a small bouquet that looked wilted even in the picture. When Sarah turned the photo over, she found a faded note. Eleanor and Daniel McCarthy, wedding day, March 15, 1889, Boston, Massachusetts. She took a picture of the writing and began her usual research. The marriage record was easy to locate. It listed Eleanor Brennan and Daniel McCarthy, married on the same date, with Father Patrick O'Brien and Margaret Brennan as witnesses. Everything looked normal, but the image still bothered her. Using a magnifying glass, she studied Daniel more closely. The more she looked, the more convinced she became that something was very wrong. His eyes looked lifeless. The shadow under his chin seemed off, almost as if his head was being held in place. His hands, folded neatly in his lap, had darkened fingernails. Sarah recognized that discoloration. She had seen it in Victorian post-mortem photographs. She began to wonder if Daniel had already passed away when the wedding photo was taken. The next morning, she searched death records from early 1889. Within an hour, she found it. Daniel Patrick McCarthy, age 26, had died on March 1st, 1889, due to injuries from a construction accident. He was buried on March 4th at St. Michael's Cemetery. Daniel had died 11 days before the supposed wedding photo. She checked the marriage record again. Father O'Brien's signature matched his other entries, and the witness shared the bride's last name, likely her sister. But the dates did not fit with the death certificate. Sarah reached out to her colleague, Dr. Michael Torres, an expert in Victorian-era photography and post-mortem practices. When she showed him the image and explained the timeline, he responded instantly. He pointed out the stiff pose, the bride standing behind him for support, the unfocused eyes, the waxy skin, and the dark fingernails. He told her that Daniel had clearly been deceased when the picture was taken. Sarah asked why anyone would stage a wedding with a dead groom. Michael suggested a likely reason: legal protection. In the 1880s, a woman's status and financial security depended heavily on marriage. If Eleanor was pregnant or needed access to Daniel's property or inheritance, proof of marriage would matter. A photograph could serve as that proof. Sarah looked again at the bride's face. Now she understood the tension. It was grief, fear, and the weight of what she was doing. She wanted to learn more about Eleanor and why she went through with this. Census records from 1880 showed Eleanor living in Boston's North End with her Irish immigrant parents. She was listed as a 17-year-old seamstress. By 1888, both of her parents had died, one in a mill accident and the other from tuberculosis. Sarah found their burial records at St. Michael's Cemetery, the same place Daniel would be buried. Eleanor would have been 25 in 1889, unmarried, and without family support in a city where single women had very few options. Seamstress work paid very little. Church records from St. Anthony's showed that she had made a special confession to Father O'Brien in January 1889. Sarah requested records related to Father O'Brien. They described him as a kind but controversial priest who often pushed boundaries to help the poorest members of his parish. A letter from the bishop in April 1889 mentioned concerns about the McCarthy marriage and demanded that Father O'Brien explain himself. More answers came from a diary kept by Eleanor's sister Margaret, which had been donated to the Historical Society. Entries from early 1889 revealed the truth. Eleanor was 3 months pregnant, and Daniel planned to marry her in April once he had saved enough money. He had given her a simple ring in February. But on March 1st, Daniel was killed at his construction job. Eleanor was devastated, and now left pregnant with no legal protection. Sarah then checked record from Daniel's employer, McCarthy and Sons Construction. Daniel's father owned the company, and Daniel was set to inherit a large portion of it. The inheritance laws of the time meant that if he died unmarried, everything would go back to his father or siblings. Eleanor would receive nothing. A letter from Patrick McCarthy to an attorney, dated one day after Daniel's burial, explained his plan. He acknowledged Eleanor's pregnancy and feared that his business partners would reject any claim made by a child born out of wedlock. His solution was to arrange a post-mortem marriage to secure benefits for Eleanor and her child. The attorney replied that the idea was risky but possible if handled carefully, with a cooperative priest, a discreet photographer, and witnesses who understood what was at stake. They went through with it. A group of people, driven by worry and compassion, helped prepare Daniel's body, arrange a ceremony, and stage a photograph. Sarah wanted to know who took the wedding portrait. A high-resolution scan revealed an embossed stamp from Morrison Studios in Beacon Hill. The studio's owner, Robert Morrison, had been known for both wedding and post-mortem photography. His business records from March 1889 listed a private commission, McCarthy wedding, special arrangements required. The fee was large at the time, and the request clearly demanded secrecy. In Morrison's later papers, Sarah found a letter he wrote in 1903. He described the event in detail. The ceremony took place at the Groom's family home on March 14th. An undertaker prepared Daniel's body to appear as lifelike as possible. Daniel was dressed in his wedding suit and supported in a chair. Eleanor stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder to mimic a natural pose. A priest performed a brief ceremony. Documents were signed. Morrison took the photograph. He wrote that the bride's face stayed with him for years. Sarah then looked into Eleanor's life after the staged wedding. She gave birth to a son, Daniel Patrick McCarthy, Jr., in June 1889. Her child was legally recognized, and she received monthly payments from Daniel's estate. She never remarried. Records show that she lived quietly with her son and her sister, working as a seamstress but supported mainly by the estate funds. The secret did not stay completely hidden. A newspaper article from late 1889 mentioned questions about the McCarthy estate and hinted at doubts about the marriage. The matter eventually reached probate court after a challenge from Daniel's uncle, who claimed the marriage was not valid. In March 1890, a year after the staged wedding, the legal challenge against Eleanor was suddenly dropped. Sarah found a settlement showing that Daniel's uncle accepted a payment of $2,000 from the estate, and in return he agreed to stop questioning Eleanor's status as Daniel's widow. Patrick McCarthy had paid his brother to protect Eleanor and his grandson. One more document showed the personal cost of the entire plan. In Father O'Brien's file at the Archdiocese, Sarah found a formal reprimand from April 1890. It stated that after reviewing irregularities in the McCarthy marriage, he was censured and removed from parish work. He was reassigned to administrative duties at the bishop's office. His choice to help Eleanor had ended his career in the parish. Sarah wondered if Eleanor had ever known how much others had sacrificed to protect her. Her research shifted when she found an autobiography published in 1945 by Daniel Patrick McCarthy, Jr., titled Raised by Ghosts, A Boston Childhood. It had long been out of print, but she found a copy in the Boston Public Library's rare book section. Most of the memoir focused on his life as a labor organizer and his childhood in working-class Boston, but one chapter, called The Wedding Photograph, revealed that he eventually learned what had really happened. Sarah read the chapter slowly. Daniel Jr. wrote that when he was 16, his mother told him the truth. They were sitting in their small parlor in Charlestown, and she took down the wedding photo that had always hung above the fireplace. She explained that Daniel had loved her, that they were engaged, and that she was 3 months pregnant when he died in a construction accident. She told him how his grandfather Patrick proposed a post-mortem wedding, how Father O'Brien agreed to help, how the photographer Morrison documented it, and how Daniel's body had been prepared and positioned for the picture. She said she married a dead man to give her son a name and legal protection. It was the only path available. Daniel Jr. wrote that he looked at the photograph with a new understanding. He saw his mother's stiff posture, his father's lifeless expression, and the deep sadness in the entire scene. He told her he was not ashamed and that his father would have wanted her to do whatever was needed to protect their child. They sat together looking at the photo, a picture of a wedding that never actually happened, but still proof of the love and protection that shaped his life. Sarah felt her eyes filling as she read. Daniel Jr. had understood what his mother endured, and he forgave her completely. His memoir explained that she lived with the secret for 27 years before finally telling him. She passed away in 1916 at the age of 53 and was buried beside Daniel at St. Michael's Cemetery. Her headstone read, "Eleanor McCarthy, beloved wife and mother. Her courage saved us all." Daniel Jr. wrote that the photo, strange as it looked, represented love and sacrifice to him. Sarah realized the story was not just about a stage wedding. It was about people helping a young woman and her unborn child survive in harsh times. As her research grew, Sarah found signs that Eleanor's case was not the only one. If this kind of effort had been made once, it likely happened before. She looked into other marriage records in Boston between 1880 and 1900, where the wedding date and death date of one spouse did not make sense. She found at least 7 such cases in Boston, each involving a marriage recorded just days or weeks after one partner had already died. One record from 1883 listed Margaret O'Sullivan marrying Thomas Donnelly on March 3rd. Thomas's death certificate showed he had died on February 28th. Margaret gave birth 5 months later. Another case from 1887 showed Catherine Ryan married James Murphy on May 10th, even though he had passed away on May 7th. Catherine was listed as a widow in the 1890 census with 2 young children. A clear pattern formed. Women who were expecting children or already caring for young ones. Men who died before planned weddings, and marriage records that did not match the timeline. Again and again, the ceremony existed on paper, even when it could not have taken place with both partners alive. Father Patrick O'Brien's name appeared on 3 of these wedding records. He had helped more than once. The photographer Robert Morrison appeared in 2 others. He, too, had participated in additional post-mortem weddings. This was not a single event. It was a quiet network of people creating a way for women and children to survive in a society that tied their security to marriage. Sarah found an 1891 letter from Father O'Brien to Morrison describing another young woman who needed help. He knew the risks but felt he could not turn away from women facing serious hardship. Even after being reprimanded, he continued assisting with quiet ceremonies and even offered his own money to widows and single mothers. In 1894, church investigators uncovered everything, and he was fully removed from priesthood. He spent the rest of his life working at a charity hospital and died in 1902. In a letter to Eleanor a year before his death, he said he had no regrets. Morrison, the photographer, faced no public fallout, but his diary showed he struggled with what he had done. By 1895, he had photographed 9 post-mortem weddings and questioned why so many women saw this as their only chance at stability. Patrick McCarthy died in 1905, leaving the business to his grandson and creating a fund for families of workers killed on the job. As laws slowly improved in the mid-1890s, the quiet network faded, but for a brief time it had provided essential help.